It's funny. We get a lot of questions about attraction. Those little signs that someone might be interested. It's
Hmm.
like a secret language we all speak, but don't always quite, understand.
Yeah.
And a lot of you have asked for a deep dive into understanding these signs, particularly from women. So we're going to be taking a closer look at a piece called Seven Signs She's Sexually Attracted to You.
Okay.
Now, full disclaimer, obviously this isn't about turning attraction into some kind of formula,
Right.
but it does offer some pretty interesting insights into how people express interest. Maybe you're prepping for a date, or maybe you're trying to decipher those mixed signals, or maybe you're just curious about human behavior.
Right.
But either way, I think we can all agree that attraction is a pretty fascinating subject.
Absolutely. I mean, what's so interesting about this is that attraction is such a complex dance. It's this interplay of physical and verbal, and even like subconscious cues, right? It's not about like checking off boxes,
Yeah.
but rather seeing the bigger picture, seeing the patterns that emerge over time.
So context is everything. Okay, so let's say you're trying to figure out if a woman is attracted to you. What should you be paying attention to? I mean, the article mentions the power of the gaze.
Yes.
Specifically a woman focusing on a man's lips.
Yes.
Lips, but why lips?
Well, think about it. Lips are incredibly expressive, right?
Yeah.
They're key to communication, both verbal and nonverbal.
Mm-hmm.
They're also, inherently sensual. And when someone's gaze lingers there, it can actually trigger a cascade of reactions in the brain.
Right.
Like, for instance, mirror neurons. They fire when we observe someone performing an action, as if we're experiencing it ourselves. So a woman gazing at a man's lips might unconsciously be simulating the experience of kissing those lips.
Oh, interesting.
Right. And generating that sense of anticipation and excitement.
So there's a lot more going on than just a simple glance.
Absolutely.
And the article even mentions, that this is even more like amplified if it's combined with other behaviors.
Right.
Like leaning in or playing with hair or, those repeated glances that we just talked about. It's about like seeing the whole picture.
Exactly. And another piece of the puzzle is physical proximity.
Right.
We all have that personal space bubble. And when someone we're attracted to enters that space, it creates a sense of intimacy, heightened awareness. Right.
Like when you're sitting next to someone and your knees brush.
Right.
Or you accidentally bump shoulders in a crowded room.
Exactly. Yeah.
I find this idea of like testing the waters through touch so fascinating. Can you maybe elaborate on how that works in practice?
Sure. So even seemingly insignificant touches can actually release oxytocin, the cuddle hormone, which promotes bonding and trust.
Wow.
So a woman might, for instance, graze a man's arm while laughing at a joke, or accidentally touch his hand while reaching for something.
Oh, I see.
Right. These subtle touches are a way to gauge his reaction, see if he reciprocates the touch or pulls away.
So it's not just about being in close proximity, but how that closeness is used to create a kind of electric tension.
Precisely. And this kind of brings us to the more intentional language of touch, right? Which adds another layer of complexity to the attraction equation.
Okay, well, the article lists examples like a hand on the arm or playful pushes, even fixing a guy's clothing.
Right.
It almost seems kind of counterintuitive, like why would you touch someone you're attracted to in such seemingly platonic ways?
Well, it's a way to establish a physical connection without being overly forward. Think of it as like a subtle escalation of intimacy. A woman might touch a man's arm to emphasize a point, or playfully push him away while teasing him. It's a way of testing the boundaries, seeing how receptive he is to her touch.
Okay, but couldn't those actions also just signal platonic interest?
Sure.
How can you tell the difference between a friendly touch and one that's like laced with attraction?
That's where paying attention to other cues becomes crucial,
Okay.
right? Is she making eye contact while touching him? Is there a playful tone to her voice? Is the touch lingering a bit longer than necessary? It's about reading those subtle nuances of the interaction.
This makes me wonder how attraction plays out in the digital world. I mean, so much of our interaction these days happens through screens, right?
Absolutely. And it's interesting how those same principles of proximity and touch kind of translate into the digital realm.
Yeah.
Right. Like The article highlights how frequent texting, social media engagement, those late-night messages, these can actually indicate a desire to stay connected, even when physically apart.
So if she's liking all your posts and sliding into your DMs and texting you memes at 2 a.m., it might be a sign that she's thinking about you, wanting to keep the conversation going.
It could be, yeah. But again, context matters.
Yeah.
What's their usual communication style? Are they like this with everyone? Or is there a noticeable difference in how they interact with you?
Right.
Right. Digital communication can sometimes blur the lines between platonic and romantic interest, so it's important to consider the overall pattern of behavior.
Speaking of pushing boundaries, the article also mentions the significance of a woman sending flirty photos or videos. This feels like taking things to another level.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
This level of vulnerability and trust is usually reserved for someone a woman feels a strong connection with. Right. It's a way of kind of escalating the flirtation, testing the waters to see if the other person's on the same page.
It's like saying, hey, I trust you enough to share this part of myself with you.
Right.
It's a pretty clear signal of interest, wouldn't you say?
It can be, yeah. But it's important to remember that everyone has different boundaries and comfort levels. What feels flirty to one person might feel invasive to another. So clear communication and mutual consent are essential, especially when things start to move in a more, intimate direction.
Great point. Okay, so we've talked about the power of the gaze, the significance of touch, and how those principles play out in the digital world. But let's bring this back to real life interactions.
Okay.
How does a woman's behavior change in social settings when she's attracted to someone?
This is where evolutionary psychology really comes into play. Right? Across many species, females have evolved subtle ways to signal their interest to potential mates. And humans are no exception.
I've always found evolutionary psychology fascinating, but it can feel a bit abstract sometimes. Could you give us a quick breakdown of how it applies to attraction cues?
Sure. In essence, evolutionary psychology suggests that our behaviors, including those related to attraction, are shaped by the forces of natural selection.
Okay.
Right. Traits that increase our ancestors' chances of survival and reproduction were more likely to be passed down to future generations. So in the context of attraction, women might unconsciously exhibit behaviors that signal their fertility, health, and overall desirability to potential mates.
So actions like positioning herself near the guy she likes, or laughing at his jokes, or trying to involve him in conversations, those are all rooted in our evolutionary past.
Exactly. These are ways of kind of subtly showcasing her interest, while also gauging his reaction. It's a delicate dance of attraction.
Yeah.
Right? Where both parties are sending and receiving signals, often without even realizing it.
Okay, so we're starting to see how this complex web of cues and signals weaves together.
Right.
But let's zoom in on one specific type of signal: compliments. The article distinguishes between generic compliments and those focused on personality or physical attributes.
Right.
Is there really that much of a difference?
There can be. Think about it. Saying nice shoes is polite, but it doesn't really reveal much about the speaker's feelings.
Yeah.
However, a compliment like, I love your sense of humor, or you have the most incredible eyes, this suggests a deeper level of appreciation and attention.
And the way a compliment is delivered can make a world of difference, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, a playful tone, a lingering glance, a slight touch on the arm. Those can add layers of meaning to even a seemingly simple compliment.
Absolutely. It's about those subtle nuances again. A genuine compliment delivered with warmth and sincerity can be incredibly powerful. It shows that you're paying attention, that you see something special in the other person.
Okay, so compliments. Check. Now let's talk about effort and attention. The article emphasizes how a woman might invest more in maintaining a connection when she's attracted to someone. But how does that translate into concrete actions?
It all comes down to prioritization.
Right.
We naturally invest our time and energy in the people and things that matter most to us.
Yeah.
So if a woman is attracted to you, she'll likely go out of her way to spend time with you, even if it means rearranging her schedule or missing out on other things.
So if she's initiating conversations, remembering inside jokes, making an effort to include you in social gatherings, that's a pretty good sign she's interested.
It's certainly suggestive. It shows that she values the connection and is willing to put in the effort to nurture it. People naturally gravitate towards those who make them feel good, who make them feel seen and appreciated.
This makes me think about how actions often speak louder than words. And in the world of attraction, it seems like those actions can be both subtle and incredibly revealing.
Precisely. We've just begun to scratch the surface of this fascinating topic. There's so much more to uncover about the subtle language of attraction.
Well, I'm definitely hooked. Let's keep diving deeper.
Attraction really is a multifaceted phenomenon, and like we've been talking about, those nonverbal cues can be some of the most revealing signs.
Oh, absolutely. We touched on body language a little bit earlier, but the article goes into like quite a bit of detail about how to read those nonverbal signs. Why do you think body language is such a powerful indicator of attraction?
Well, body language is so fascinating because it's often subconscious. We might be trying to play it cool on the surface, but our bodies betray our true feelings through these subtle gestures and movements.
So it's like a window into someone's subconscious.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to be aware of these cues. It can give you a deeper understanding of how someone is truly feeling, even if they're not explicitly saying it.
Okay, so let's try to like decode some of those signals.
Yeah.
The article mentions leaning in, mirroring gestures, playing with hair, and biting lips. What's the story behind those actions?
So leaning in is a classic sign of interest. It shows that you're engaged in the conversation and you want to be closer to the person. Mirroring someone's gestures is another subconscious way of building rapport.
Oh, interesting.
It creates a sense of connection and harmony.
It's like you're on the same wavelength even if you don't realize it.
Right.
Okay, what about playing with hair or biting lips?
Those can be signs of nervous energy or even flirtation. Think about it, touching your hair or lips draws attention to those features. It can be a way of subtly highlighting your attractiveness.
I never really thought about it that way, but it makes sense. It's like a subconscious way of saying, "Hey, check this out."
Right, exactly. And it's all part of that intricate dance of attraction we've been discussing. You mentioned flirting earlier. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the article describes it as like a spectrum, from subtle teasing to more overt comments and gestures. But honestly, I've always found flirting a bit mystifying. It seems like there's a fine line between like playful banter and coming across as awkward or even creepy.
Well, I think the key to flirting effectively is to be playful and genuine. It's about showing interest in someone in a lighthearted and fun way.
Yeah.
And like any form of communication, it's a two-way street. You pay attention to the other person's cues and adjust your approach accordingly.
So if she's reciprocating your laughing at your jokes and maybe even like throwing in a few flirty comments of her own, that's a good sign, right?
It could be, but again, it's all about reading the context. What's her overall demeanor? Is she making eye contact? Is there a sense of playfulness in her body language?
It sounds like there's a lot of room for like misinterpretation. How can you be sure you're not reading too much into things?
Well, that's the challenge with attraction cues, right? They're not always clear cut.
Yeah.
And sometimes the best way to clear up any confusion is to simply ask.
You mean like do direct and say, "Hey, I'm getting the sense you might be interested. Am I reading this right?"
Exactly. It might feel a little vulnerable, but open and honest communication is crucial in any relationship, whether it's romantic or platonic.
I love that, it takes the pressure off trying to be a mind reader, and it allows for genuine connection.
Precisely. And even if it turns out that the attraction isn't mutual, at least you'll have clarity and can move forward with respect.
Right.
Now, before we wrap things up, there's one more point from the article I want to highlight it. It emphasizes how a woman might prioritize a man's presence when she's attracted to him.
Oh, yeah. We talked about prioritization, in terms of like effort and attention, but how does that like manifest specifically in how she interacts with him?
It goes beyond just making time for him. It's about how she engages with him, even in group settings. Does she seek out his opinion? Does she make an effort to include him in conversations? Does she seem genuinely interested in what he has to say?
So if she's like focusing her attention on him even when there are other people around, that's a pretty strong indicator of interest.
It suggests that he's at the forefront of her mind.
Yeah.
Which can be a powerful sign of attraction. Remember, we tend to gravitate towards those who make us feel valued and important.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of the subtle language of attraction.
It's been a pleasure diving deep into this topic with you, and remember, this is just the beginning of the journey.
You know, throughout this conversation, we've explored the power of the gaze, the significance of touch, the nuances of body language, and so much more. But what does this all mean for our listener who specifically asked for insights into understanding attraction from women?
Well, we provided a framework for understanding those subtle cues and signals, but ultimately it's up to the listener to apply this knowledge to their own unique interactions and experiences.
Yeah, it's like we've given them a map, but they get to choose their own adventure.
Exactly. And remember, there's no guaranteed formula for deciphering attraction. It's a complex interplay of individual personalities, social context, and cultural influences. But by becoming more aware of these subtle cues, you can certainly become a more astute observer of human behavior.
And maybe even navigate the world of attraction with a bit more confidence and clarity.
Precisely. Now, before we sign off, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question. Now that you're more attuned to these signs of attraction, how will you use this knowledge to build deeper connections?
Will you be more observant of those subtle cues, more confident in expressing your own interest, or perhaps more willing to take a chance and see where things lead?
The power is in your hands. Use it wisely and respectfully.
Beautifully said. And that wraps up our deep dive into attraction cues.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I feel like I've learned a lot today.
It's been a fascinating exploration. And remember, the journey of understanding attraction is ongoing. There's always more to discover.
Absolutely. So keep those eyes peeled, those ears open, and most importantly, those hearts receptive. Who knows? You might just find yourself deciphering the subtle language of attraction with newfound confidence and clarity. You know, it's funny, even as we've been having this conversation, I've been thinking back to times when I totally misread signals.
Oh, I'm sure we've all been there.
Right, like that time I was convinced this woman was totally flirting with me, only to find out like she was just being friendly. It's a humbling experience.
Yeah, it's a reminder that these cues aren't, foolproof.
Yeah.
We all bring our own biases and experiences to the table, which can color our perceptions.
Exactly, and that's why I think it's so important to remember that attraction is a two-way street. It's not just about decoding someone else's signals, but also being aware of the signals that we're sending.
Absolutely, and that's where self-awareness and emotional intelligence really come into play. Right? The more we understand our own motivations and behaviors, the better equipped we are to navigate the complexities of attraction.
So it's not just about learning the language of attraction, but also becoming more fluent in our own emotional expression.
Precisely, and that involves being honest with ourselves about our intentions. Are we genuinely interested in getting to know this person, or are we just caught up in the chase?
That's a great point. I think sometimes we can get so focused on deciphering someone else's feelings that we lose sight of our own. But ultimately, attraction should be about connection, not just conquest.
Well said. And that connection can only flourish when there's mutual respect, open communication, and a genuine desire to understand each other.
So listener, as we wrap up this deep dive into attraction cues, we want to leave you with this thought: how will you use this newfound knowledge to navigate your own interactions and potentially create deeper connections? Will you be more observant of those subtle signs, more confident in expressing your own interest, or perhaps more willing to take a chance and see where things lead?
Remember, the journey of understanding attraction is ongoing. There's always more to learn, more to explore, and more to discover about ourselves and the intricate dance of human connection.
That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating exploration.
Until next time, stay curious and keep diving deep.